Does the president have immunity to murder a political rival? That was the question asked by Supreme Court Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor during oral arguments moments ago. Let's listen.
If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
It could.
The Supreme Court today is taking up the question of whether former President Donald Trump is immune from prosecution for actions he took while in office to try to overturn the 2020 election results. That decision will determine whether Trump will face election interference charges in Washington. Lower courts have found he cannot claim immunity. And remember, the court's answer to the question of whether Trump is immune to charges will be a major statement on the scope of presidential power. It will also determine whether the former president's trial will start before the 2024 election. This is just one of 4 criminal cases he's facing.
Now, more trouble could be coming for Trump. A grand jury in Arizona indicted Trump aides and allies and fake electors after an investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Former Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani and a former White House chief of staff Mark Meadows, as well as 2020 campaign advisor Boris Epshteyn, were indicted. They are accused of aiding an unsuccessful strategy to give the state's electoral votes to Trump instead of Biden. 1 month following the 2020 election, 11 Trump supporters convened at the Arizona GOP headquarters to sign a document claiming to be Arizona's 11 electors to the Electoral College. These Republicans are facing felony charges over that behavior. Trump is also back in court today for the hush money Stormy Daniels case, where he faces 34 counts of falsifying business records. National Enquirer publisher David Pecker is resuming his testimony today, revealing details about the tabloid's efforts to buy and kill unflattering stories about Trump and other celebrities. Trump's request to skip the trial for the day so he could sit in on the Supreme Court session was denied.
There is a lot of news in this segment. Okay, so right up top, we discussed when the lower courts were pretty uniform, I believe unanimous, in deciding that Donald Trump did not have presidential immunity. The principal question is, does presidential immunity attach to acts that you take in your own personal self-interest, as opposed to acts you do in the duty and furtherance of your duties as president? It's very difficult to argue that Donald Trump, who is alleged to have known that these are fake slates of electors, to have known that he did not win in a state like Arizona or any of the other states where he was contesting, the 7 other states where he was contesting the election results, to then try to use his power of the presidency to overturn the election result, spreading knowingly fake news about whether or not the election results were in his favor in these various states, pressuring election officials, saying libelous things about various election officials in Georgia about stuffing ballot boxes and the like. And whether or not now he should be held liable or can be held liable for a conspiracy to defraud the public.
Yes, and I think it is very important for anyone who's tempted to defend Trump on these grounds, and frankly, I don't hear many people trying to defend Trump on these grounds. I'm not seeing a lot of support for the idea that not Trump, but the office of the presidency, the person who is the executive, should have blanket immunity from all kinds of criminal, unethical, immoral acts, including assassinations. Sonia Sotomayor, escalated that to the most out there hypothetical and got, I think, the answer she was looking for, which is the attorney forced to say that, well, yeah, that could potentially be covered under immunity. Obviously, that's not at all acceptable, I don't think, to the American people. That is not consistent with our founding documents. That is not the attitude that the president can do that unilaterally, and then we have no checks and balances. Then we just have a king.
Yeah.
So
and we've been talking a lot about whether or not these cases matter, how much Trump supporters really care about any of this, and there's been a lot of skepticism about whether or not liberals are kind of over-investing in these lawsuits as stopping Trump. And I think that's true that it is unlikely that a conviction in one of these lawsuits will be timely enough to actually prevent him from running for office. But in some ways, I think that's a good thing. I think that having a conviction undermining a democratic process is a bad look. I think a better outcome, frankly, for Democrats is a world where voters simply change their mind about Trump because finally there is a more detailed conversation about what he is alleging he's allowed to do, about what he's actually accused of with respect to election interference that goes beyond the contours of just what other people people did at the Capitol on 1/6. Now we're squarely in the realm of Donald Trump's own behavior, and frankly, it's not very flattering.
Yeah, I mean, the series of events, okay, conviction before the election and then Trump loses is going to result in a huge, everyone in conservative land is going to say the election was stolen on that basis. It's going to be like last time and then some. Conviction after he loses is going to be that, but maybe less so.
Yeah.
Acquittal after he loses, who cares? Acquittal after he wins, additionally, who cares? Conviction and then he wins is the we descend into civil war scenario is the fear that I have.
Well, unless again, the question is whether or not he may not win precisely because of the unseemliness of some of these charges. So we're also entering into another day of this hush money trial in New York. This is one of the cases that I think got dismissed more frequently by commentators across the political spectrum just because it's substantively less serious than, say, an election interference case. However, this is a case where we're now talking about Donald Trump doing the kind of thing that he has inveighed so strongly against in other contexts. It's not an identical comparison, but there has been so much discourse, particularly in right media spaces, and not wrongly so, about what it means for media institutions like Twitter and others to have gone out of their way to suppress an unflattering story to the president, to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, this entire case is about Donald Trump engaging in catch and release, using his personal relationship with the National Enquirer to have that magazine bring unflattering stories to him and say, hey, I appreciate a relationship. You feed me good stuff about what's going on behind the scenes at the Apprentice. I don't want to mess up a good thing. Somebody who you is alleging that you had a previous sexual relationship with them, and it would be really bad for your campaign. We can buy this story for them so that they can't shop it to other magazines, but you have to pay us for it. And that's happened once. They killed the story. Donald Trump allegedly did not actually pay for those services.
Right.
Then it happened again with Stormy Daniels. National Enquirer is like, we're not going to keep doing this unless you finally pay us. And that's the moment where it's alleged that Donald Trump employed Michael Cohen to make a payment on his behalf, and then fraudulently so listed it as allegedly as a legal expense as opposed to what it was, which is this catch and kill scheme that had nothing to do with this campaign.
But we're litigating, whether it is a violation of the law because of is it a campaign expenditure aspect of it. It would not necessarily be illegal if he was not running for.
That's my point.
But let me finish. But the difference, I think, from the Hunter Biden scenario, and they're not totally dissimilar. I get your point, but there's the additional concern of what did law enforcement do to what did literal government officials do to pressure and extort that kind of behavior from social media companies, which is different than in the Trump case, where it's just
Trump. It's just Trump doing the pressuring and the extorting. But this is the question.
Yeah, but he's a private actor.
So there's so much of this has been framed around what does the public deserve to know? Who's really protecting the interests of the public and free speech and the freedom of the press to report on what they want to report? And so, yes, this is
not Trump and not Biden, sure.
Well, this is a somewhat different issue, but whether or not Trump can now can frame himself as someone who is interested in sunlight being the best disinfectant. Of the public being able to get real knowledge about who they're able to vote for going into election, because that is the real harm that was done, right? That the public was not able to know prior to voting in 2020 about the Hunter laptop case and decide for themselves as to whether or not that should inform their choice to vote for Joe Biden or not. Donald Trump is now there's a public discussion now about the fact that he did the same thing, using his relationship with a national media institution to buy and kill a story that would have been
but he wasn't
flattering
president
to him
when he did that.
No.
He was just a citizen Trump.
Right. But here we are.
Yeah.
And can you frame yourself as someone who has the interest of the public and the public's interest of having full knowledge and be able to make informed political decisions at heart when you are now in the center of a scandal where you use your money, and perhaps fraudulently so, to conceal truths about yourself from the public? Not to mention, we haven't even gotten to the substance of how the public might feel about Donald Trump engaging in these underlying activities in the first place.
All right, we'll have more Rising right after this.